Welcome, Pramod, to this interview series showcasing HKIAC's leadership. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thank you. So what I would like to do is give an overview of your career and then talk a bit about some of your views with respect to international arbitration in India at HKIAC and in the investor state arbitration space. So starting with your career, you are a graduate of the National University of India, as well as Cambridge University. And I note from your credentials that you were ranked first, top of class, first rank at the university, and that you actually have quite an impressive collection of gold medals. Gold medal in international law, administrative law, constitutional law, and criminal law from the National University of India. Do you still have all of those gold medals?
Well, I do, and it does entertain my son from time to time.
Okay, wonderful. So after you graduated, you joined a prominent national Indian law firm, Dewar Associates, as a litigator, and you worked there for 4 years. And after that, you went to Cambridge, where you were a visiting fellow at the Lauter Pact Research Centre for International Law. And you were there for a year in that role. And then you joined Herbert Smith in London, the International Arbitration Group, as a solicitor advocate. And you were there also for almost 5 years in London. Then you came back to India and you joined JSA or J. Sagar Associates as a partner for 3 years, and that's another prominent national Indian firm. And after that, you then set up your own chambers, Aristas Chambers, from which you work now. And you are a dispute resolution specialist, obviously, both in international and domestic arbitration as well as litigation. You serve as counsel and as arbitrator. You also represent the Republic of India in a number of investor state arbitrations, and you do advisory work for the government also in that area. You specialize, your experience really lies in public international law, international trade law, and commercial litigation and arbitration. In terms of the HKIAC, you were appointed to our council last year in March, and in June you were also appointed to our proceedings committee, which is one of our standing committees, the one that is mandated to take a wide number of procedural issues in cases under our auspices. So we are very grateful for the contribution that you make on the committee and on the council.
Thank you. I'm delighted to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the questions I want to pose to you, well, I think the first one is that, you are a leading expert in international and domestic arbitration in India. And India has seen so many changes in its legislation over the past few years. How would you describe the current situation in terms of arbitration in India? And if you can generalize, what do you think are the most important aspects of arbitration for Indian users?
There are two parts to that question. So let me start with the first in terms of where India stands today. I think India is going through a very exciting phase in embracing arbitration as the method of choice for resolving commercial disputes. The vast majority of commercial contracts today would contain arbitration clauses, and this number is only increasing with every passing year. So the commercial world is quite resolute in its preference for arbitration, and that's very different from what things looked like probably 10 years or 15 years ago. What is also heartening is the maturity of approach that the Indian courts have shown to arbitration in recent times. I would, of course, admit that historically there has been some distrust of arbitration in India, but those attitudes are changing. And over the last decade in particular, the Indian courts have been quite steadfast in their support for arbitration. And I think that's a huge plus. This judicial support for arbitration has been backed up with parliamentary intervention. And the purpose of such parliamentary intervention is to refresh the Act from time to time. The Indian Arbitration Act is of the year 1996. And the first set of amendments were brought in 2015. And there were some further amendments which were brought in last year in 2019. And the purpose, the fundamental purpose of all these amendments has been to modernize India's arbitration regime, both in relation to domestic arbitration and in respect of fostering a pro-enforcement approach for foreign arbitral awards. Of course, I would always say that there is a lot more that could be done, but it is clear that the attitude of all the stakeholders in the development of arbitration and the actual development of arbitration jurisprudence in India, all of that is firmly on a pro-arbitration trajectory. And that, I think, is great for users, it's great for arbitration practitioners, and I think it's particularly useful for all those hordes of students who are so keen to study arbitration in the universities today. And I think that only augurs well for the future of arbitration here.
Excellent.
As far as the second aspect of the question, in terms of the most important aspects of arbitration for Indian users, I would think that the important aspects of arbitration for Indian users are not very different from what is important to users of arbitration in other parts of the world as well. There is, however, a very distinct trend of Indian parties in the recent past shifting their preference from ad hoc arbitration to institutional arbitration and being far more comfortable than they were in the past in opting for international institutions to administer their arbitrations. And this trend is backed up with data from the caseload of international institutions, which show a robust increase year on year in relation to India-related arbitration. So that, I think, is an important factor. The second aspect that I would lay some emphasis on is for Indian users, as I would assume would also be the case for users of arbitration in other parts of the world. Speed is important. And speed is now mandated by legislation for arbitrations seated in India. In 2015, Parliament intervened to stipulate that arbitration seated in India should be completed from start to finish in 1 year, absent compelling or extraordinary circumstances. They were skeptics about how this would work out, and I was one of the skeptics at the time. But in practice, it has actually worked brilliantly in bringing in greater discipline and urgency to arbitration proceedings. Flexibility is important, all the more so in the current context where arbitration has been able to transition more quickly and more effectively to electronic filings and online hearings. The usual factors of domain expertise and integrity in decision makers, confidentiality are also important factors for users of arbitration to embrace arbitration clauses. One last factor, if I could mention, is the access to third-party funding aspect. Now, access to third-party funding is increasingly an important consideration for Indian parties. The legality of third-party funding is still a controversial and uncertain matter in the Indian context, but it does serve an important function, in my view, in broadening access to justice. In the last two to 3 years, in particular, at least half the parties that I've represented in international arbitrations have, at the very minimum, inquired about the possibility of third-party funding for their claims. There is much, I think, that India can learn from Hong Kong, and especially if India can enact legislation to permit and regulate third-party funding, as Hong Kong has. I have no doubt that this would be something that is widely welcomed amongst the users of arbitration in India.
Oh, very interesting. You know, we are seeing now that it's lawful in Hong Kong. We're starting to see the pipeline start to flow and more cases being funded by third-party funders. So, yeah, that's an exciting prospect for Indian users if that is able to be put through legislatively. Yeah. You talked about the shift from ad hoc arbitration to institutional arbitration. And, you know, you serve on HKIAC's proceedings committee as well as the governing board, the council. And I know that you also spent 5 years on the LCIA court. And I just wanted to talk to you about, you know, the contribution of institutional decision-making. You're at the forefront of it. You see it, you see how it works. Tell me what you think about the process and the added value of institutional decision-making and how you see that work at HKIAC.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, let me say what a real privilege it has been to work with you and the wonderful team at the HKIAC Secretariat. This is not insincere praise, and I really mean it. There is a lot of hard work and a lot of excellent work which goes on behind the scenes, which perhaps the actual users of your services may not be aware of. but it does ensure the smooth and speedy conduct of arbitration. About the HKIAC's Council and Proceedings Committee, there are two main aspects which have struck me. Firstly, the quality of the membership, and second, the quality of the deliberations. The HKIAC Council, as you well know, and its committees have a fantastic breadth of experience and expertise. Members from across the world straddling the civil law and the common law traditions, expertise in most of the industry sectors which create arbitration disputes. And the ability to draw from this range of experience when required, no doubt, provides reassurance to the users of the HKIAC services. On the second point, if I may dwell a bit on that, the quality of deliberations. I think during my time on the HKIAC's Council and Proceedings Committee since 2019, every single matter that has come up on the agenda, be it an application for an expedited procedure, consolidation of two or more arbitrations, joinder of parties or challenges to an arbitrator, every single matter is carefully analyzed from all angles, debated widely and extensively when necessary before a final decision is taken. I think the quality of discussion is fantastic. We don't always agree. We don't always reach a consensus, as you well know. I have been in the minority on a few occasions, but it should really be that way so that any decision which is ultimately taken is informed, well-reasoned, and stress-tested to withstand any kind of scrutiny in the future. And I think it is this rigor and the quality of decision-making, which I think is unique to the HKIAC and is an essential part of the institution's DNA.
Yeah. No, I thoroughly agree. I thoroughly agree. It's a lot of work that is somewhat invisible, but it's very important. Maintain the quality of decision-making for users. Yeah. So, you know, it strikes me you have such a range of experience from public international law, international commercial arbitration, but you also have so much experience in investor-state arbitration. And you are, of course, representing the government and also doing advisory work for the government, and not just in terms of disputes, but also with respect to their positions in the UNCITRAL ISDS reform setting. You know, with respect to your experience and what you've seen over the years, what do you think about the future for investor-state arbitration, say within Asia more broadly, especially in this time of quite a lot of flux?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think ISDS is in a state of flux. There are many concerns raised by states. A lot of them are Asian states, but also by investors from time to time. And the concerns relate to the quality of reasoning in certain decisions, the lack of consistency, moral hazards in the appointment of arbitrators, the lack of diversity in arbitrator appointments is becoming an increasingly important topic. The problems with double hatting or multiple hatting, multiple and parallel proceedings on effectively the same cause of action, abuse of process, etc. So these are all concerns and these are all pain points for states. Also, some of them are pain points for investors. But despite all these criticisms against the system, and the criticisms are particularly trenchant in this part of the world where I sit, my personal view is that ISDS is here to stay, and it certainly is here to stay as far as the Asian countries are concerned. And that is primarily because ISDS serves a valuable function for all these states. ISDS has a role in encouraging the free flow of investment across the globe. It has a broader role to play in entrenching the rule of law in the international community, a point which should not be glossed over. And ISDS does give international law teeth. And therefore, despite all their misgivings about certain issues, my sense is that states understand this. And Asian states certainly understand this. And that's the reason why there are more and more BITs and international investment agreements entered into by Asian states. That's also why, rather than rejecting ISDS or investment protections wholesale, the endeavor of most countries in Asia and other parts of the world is to explore ways to address what they perceive as problems with the current treaty regime and ISDS mechanism. So therefore, reform, not reject, is the mantra or the approach taken by states, even states which believe that they have been at the receiving end of some rather controversial decisions. Also, another aspect in Asia in particular is the fact that due to Asia's rising global prominence in the economic field, Asian states are also a major source of outbound FDI. And Asian countries, therefore, have a growing interest in protecting the rights of their nationals who invest in other countries. Therefore, in this part of the world, it is quite certain that not only will IASDS persist in one form or another for years to come, it is also poised for a phase of exciting growth.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for those insights and your views on looking forward, looking ahead. I have one final question for you. I know that you've visited Hong Kong many times, and at least 3 times for Hong Kong Arbitration Week. And while Hong Kong Arbitration Week is going ahead this year, it will be a hybrid in-person for local people, and then also virtual for those who cannot travel to Hong Kong. So we may not see you in person here in Hong Kong this year, but I hope that we will see you through a screen. But tell me, what are your favorite things about visiting Hong Kong when you can?
Okay. Well, I have a very special affinity for Hong Kong. The first case that I did as an arbitrator was a case that was seated in Hong Kong. So therefore, I have very fond memories for professional reasons, also for personal reasons. I like the buzz of the place. It's a very lively city. The last time I was there, I visited with my family, and they loved it too. I think a lot of impressions that you form about a place is based on the people you meet. And therefore, for me personally, Hong Kong is a place I love to visit because of the many friends that I have there. Hong Kong, of course, and you know this, also ticks all the boxes for a great center of arbitration. So for professional reasons, apart from, of course, a fantastic arbitration regime and a supportive judiciary, which are must-haves for any leading arbitration seat, professionally speaking, Hong Kong is a great center for arbitration because of its superb connectivity, the quality of the hearing facilities, excellent restaurants, the importance of which should not be underestimated, and the wonderful walking trails. So all of these combine really to make Hong Kong a compelling case for Hong Kong to be an important seat for arbitration in this region, and for that matter across the world.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward very much to the next time that we can see you here in person.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Likewise.
Thank you. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.